Hi everyone, how are you doing? I hope you're well and your studies are going smoothly. It's time to revise and you can do it with me here. Today we're going to look at research into the short-term and long-term memory for AQA Psych Paper 1. Let's go. I'm all about active revision, so here's your chance to blurt what you know about research into STM and LTM and the properties of the two stores. Grab a whiteboard, grab a bit of paper, just do it. No excuses. Give it a go, just like 20 seconds, see what you can remember, and then play the video again. Come back to see what I've got and we'll talk through it. So there was your chance. Here's what I've got. So not masses of content here, but there are a few studies that you might be aware of. So it might make sense visually to sort of separate it up into the two stores and then each of these three properties. So capacity, how much can they hold? In terms of STM, you hopefully know that it's 7 plus or minus 2 items, so that's 5 to 9 for most people. You might be aware of either research done by Miller, who was the magic number 7 plus or minus 2 person, or a similar study by Jacobs. But basically, you show participants strings of numbers and get them to remember it, and you go up one each time until you find their capacity. So show them, like 4 digits, then 5, then 6, then 7, and see how far they can go. You've probably done it in class. There isn't really any research into the capacity of LTM because I don't think anybody's really filled up their LTM. So yeah. Let's just say that's potentially infinite. In terms of duration, remember that is how long can each store actually hold information for. We're looking at about maybe 18 to 30 seconds for STM, and that comes from Peterson and Peterson's trigram study. The Brown-Peterson technique it's also referred to as. And that's where, again, I'm sure you remember, participants are shown strings of 3 consonants, like K, M, L, or something like that. And then they have to count backwards from a 3-digit number as a bit of a distraction task, and then after, for example, 3 seconds, 6, 9, 12, and so on, they have to recall that trigram. You, in terms of LTM, are probably aware of the study by Harry Barrick et al. That was the yearbook one, where they got participants to come back, college graduates, either maybe a few months after leaving school or even several decades, and basically tested them in a variety of different ways to see if they could remember the people they went to school with. So you could talk about that one for duration of LTM. In terms of encoding, remember that is the form in which the information is actually stored in that memory store. STM is encoded acoustically, so that means that we store information initially in terms of the sound, so what the information sounds like. And in terms of LTM, we actually over time pay more attention to the meaning. We forget the initial sound, the actual detail of it, and then it's the meaning, the gist of it. Yeah, that's the LTM. And one study covers both, thankfully. So I would go for the acoustic similarity study by Baddeley, where he gave participants 2 lists of words. One list where they sound the same, or a list of words that sound the same, maybe they rhyme or they start with the same sound, and a list of words that maybe mean the same thing, but obviously sound different, and then tested them immediately, or tested them after 20 minutes. The immediate recall was far superior for the list that actually meant the same, so the list that sounded differently, because what's happening in the STM is your short-term memory is encoding the sound of the words. So if you're trying to remember a list of words that sound the same, in the short term, all that happens is your STM is jumbling them up, so you can't actually remember the order of them. So performance was lower. After 20 minutes, it's debatable that that's really long-term memory, but after 20 minutes, the performance was much better for the words that sounded the same, because similarly you're getting in the long term that jumbling up effect. So the words that meant the same, they start to get confused because we're just focusing on the meaning with LTM. Right, I've probably spent too long there, but I wanted to give you that context. I know that some students do struggle particularly with that Baddeley study. Right, let's crack on. Alright, second part of the video. It's your chance now that we've done some blurting, some discussion, some recapping of the actual material, to actually put it into practice. It's up to you what you do with this, but here is your chance to pause the video. You've got timings, you've got marks and stuff there. Pick a couple to have a go at. You might even want to plan the 16 marker. It's up to you, but when you're ready, you've done what you want to do, press play on the video again, and then I'll talk through each of the questions. Alright, so outline one way in which researchers have studied the capacity of STM. We've got 2 marks here, and just thinking about what we blurted and what we reviewed earlier, this is about capacity, so it's going to be one of those digit span tasks, okay? The focus here is on how researchers have studied it. So I would just be talking through that procedure that I went through earlier on for 2 marks. Explain the term duration. Distinguish between the duration of STM and the duration of LTM. Quite a straightforward question, really. It's got 2 parts. So 1 mark, just explaining the term duration. Remember, that is about how long information can be stored for by that particular memory store. And then distinguish, the focus here is on the difference. So you're going to say STM is 18 to 30 seconds, whereas LTM is potentially infinite. Hopefully an easy 3 marks for you. Outline 2 criticisms of 1 study of STM. So you have to pick 1 study and commit to it for 2 problems, 2 flaws, 2 criticisms. All right, so what have we got? Well, we talked about a few earlier. You could pick any of these. Depends which one you're more confident with, doesn't it? I might go with Peterson and Peterson, for example. And in terms of 2 criticisms, so breaking it down to 2 marks plus 2 marks here, you'd probably talk about how the materials were artificial. So using trigrams, I mean, they're meaningless. We don't really have to remember that sort of thing in our everyday life. Maybe that means the study and the findings are going to lack mundane realism or ecological validity. Plenty to say there. That's more than 2 marks, I expect. What else could we say? Well, I know with Peterson and Peterson, the study was actually done on a relatively small sample. I think it was about 20 or 24 of them. But it was actually psychology students, so even more restricted in terms of its generalizability. So I'd probably just make a comment about that. Yeah. The studies are, relatively similar in terms of their flaws. So this time we need to use our knowledge of memory to explain what's going to happen in the study. So we are basically doing a version of the Baddeley study that we talked about earlier. So list A, costly, pricey, expensive, lavish, they all mean the same thing, don't they? List B, herd, bird, nerd, they all rhyme, okay? So they sound the same. So what is going to happen? Well, if we are tested immediately, then what's going to happen is those words that sound the same are going to get jumbled by the STM, aren't they? Because the STM encodes acoustically. So list B, we're probably going to remember them all, but we're going to muddle them up. Or maybe include words that weren't there. Whereas list A, because they sound different, we're more likely to be able to remember those correctly. Because we're focusing on that sound. Costly, pricey, expensive. They all sound different, don't they? Okay. So list A, therefore, is likely to be recalled better than list B, is our answer, because of that acoustic similarity effect. Discuss research into duration in memory. Now, really important that you focus on duration here and only duration. So, in terms of duration, we talked earlier about the Peterson and Peterson study. I've mentioned that already. And the Barrick study. Again, we went through that one earlier, so I'm not going to repeat the procedures here. But in terms of marks, you're looking here at 3 marks for AO1, so knowledge, and 5 marks for AO3, that discussion. So it's up to you whether you want to focus on one study if you know a couple of things about it. You could probably get away with just doing that here. So Peterson and Peterson, we talked earlier about the procedure, the findings you could talk about as well, because that is the duration, that's what they found. And we already talked about 2 criticisms of it. So you could do that, and you could turn that into a bit more of a discussion and talk about actually one of the benefits of it, or one of the strengths of it, was a high level of control because it was a lab setting. So there's enough to say there just on Peterson and Peterson to do 8 marks. But if you weren't confident, you could do a little bit on that and then maybe bring in a little bit of knowledge about Barrick's study and have a little bit of a discussion there and say, in contrast to the work of Peterson and Peterson, actually Barrick's research on duration arguably is more valuable in terms of its real life application because it's using, real material that we might actually want to remember. So have a bit of a discussion, a bit of contrast there. Maybe it's got greater ecological validity because it's on, yearbooks. But maybe, in contrast to Peterson and Peterson, you've got a lack of control here because, who knows, maybe the participants in Barrick's research actually occasionally look through their yearbook. Now, in reality, they did sort of ask about that and try and control for that, but it is a bit of an issue still. So there you go, 2 different approaches to that question. So lastly, we've got discuss research into the STM for 16 marks. Now, you know that it's going to be 6 marks of AO1 knowledge, and then 10 marks of evaluation, discussion and commentary. So focusing on the idea that it's discuss research, well, research does include theory, so you could sort of be including your definitions of capacity, duration and coding if you want. But I'm always tempted when it says research to actually put the focus on studies because that makes more sense to me and gives me lots to talk about. So different ways into this question. You could focus just on capacity if you know enough, or just on duration if you know enough. But I'd be tempted to sort of do at least 2 of the studies listed there, or 2 of the properties listed there. Maybe talk about duration and encoding. That's enough to say there for 6 marks. In terms of the 10 discussion marks, we've talked about issues already. You could have a discussion about how a lot of this research is artificial, maybe talk about the small sample sizes, maybe really to stretch this up, what you could do is sort of have a bit of a discussion about how maybe the long-term memory research is actually maybe more valuable or more realistic, and how maybe STM research needs to sort of move in that direction to be more valid and more worthwhile. But there's loads to say. We've talked about several things already in this video. Okay, so that brings us towards the end, and it's important before you click off that you take a minute to reflect. So what happened? Why did it happen? What are you going to do next? What's your action plan? I've got links in the descriptions if you're looking for any of my other resources, including stuff on Amazon. Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope that went well for you. Good luck with it all. Have a lovely day. Do me a favour and click those like and subscribe buttons if you want to support the channel. And I'll see you in another video.